They hired me for one night. Walk the halls, check the locks, confirm nothing's changed since the city condemned it. Ashgrove Memorial's been closed for 50 years. Nobody works there. Nobody's supposed to. The lobby smelled like wet plaster and something under it. Something sweet, gone bad. My flashlight caught the reception desk first. Dust thick as felt. A rotary phone still on the hook. And behind it, a wall clock, hands frozen at 3:14, glass cracked in a spiderweb from the center out. I almost laughed. Almost. Then the lights in Ward 2 came on. Not flickered, not sparked. Came on, one fixture at a time, down the hallway, like someone was walking ahead of me flipping switches. I checked my radio. Dead air. I checked the panel by the stairwell. The hospital's been unplugged from the grid since the 70s. There's no power to cycle. I should have left. I told myself I'd just look. One hallway. The gurneys were lined up like they were waiting for a shift that never came. For poles standing at attention, bags long since dried to dust inside the plastic. And every room I passed had a mirror. Cheap hospital-issue mirrors bolted above the sinks, and every single one of them was clean. Spotless. In a building where everything else wore 50 years of rot. I found the nurse's station at the end of the hall. A logbook sat open on the counter, pen resting in the crease like someone had just set it down. The last entry was dated the night the hospital closed. The handwriting was neat. Clinical. It read, patient transfer complete. All units accounted for. Then, under it, in different ink, added later. Much later, the ink still looked wet, one more line. Except one. That's when the lights behind me started going out. Same order they'd come on. Room by room. Like something was following the same path back, checking each one, making sure I hadn't gone in. I didn't run. I want that on record. I didn't run. I walked. Fast, retracing my own steps, and every mirror I passed on the way out was fogged now, like someone had just breathed on the glass from the inside. The lobby clock still read 3:14 when I hit the doors. I checked my watch. It was 3:14 exactly. I've worked nights for 6 years. I know what an empty building sounds like. The settling, the pipes, the wind finding gaps in old windows. This wasn't that. This was quiet the way a held breath is quiet. My contract said one walkthrough. Confirm nothing's changed. I can confirm that. Nothing has changed. Ashgrove Memorial is still running its shift, 50 years late, one patient short. And I have a horrible feeling somebody's still trying to fill that bed. I didn't go back for my final check. The county sent me to catalog what was left in the Ashgrove Memorial Archive before the demolition crew moves in. Boxes of patient files, most of them ruined by water damage. Routine work. I've done a dozen buildings like this. Room 214's file wasn't in a box. It was in the active drawer, the one meant for current patients. In a hospital that's had 0 current patients since 1974. I pulled it, set it on my cart, kept working. When I came back to the drawer 20 minutes later to file something else, 214's folder was back inside, tucked exactly where I'd found it. I told myself I hadn't actually moved it. I'm efficient. I don't second-guess my own hands. So I pulled it again, and this time I carried it to the far end of the archive, set it under a stack of unrelated files, and kept working in full view of that stack. I looked up maybe 10 minutes later. The stack was undisturbed. The file was gone from under it. Back in the active drawer. That's when I heard the gloves. Not footsteps. I want to be precise about this. The sound of latex against latex, someone flexing their hands, slow and deliberate, from the row behind me. I turned. A man in a stained white coat stood at the far end of the stacks. Tall, too tall for the low archive ceiling it seemed. Face turned fully away into the shadow between 2 shelving units. He didn't move. He didn't need to. I understood, standing there, that he'd been the one refiling it the whole time, and that he'd been doing it since before I ever pulled it the first time. I asked who he was. My voice barely made it out of my throat. He didn't answer. He lifted one gloved hand and pointed, once, at the drawer. A request, or an instruction. I looked at the file. On the tab, under the patient number, someone had written a name in fresh ballpoint over the original faded typewriter print. My name. Not the patient's. Mine. When I looked back up, he was gone. Not retreated into shadow. Gone. The space where he'd stood as empty as if no one had ever filled it. I checked the archive log later that week, cross-referencing hospital staff records from before the closure. Chief of Surgery, 1961 to 1974, Dr. Warren Callahan. Terminated from record the same night the building closed. No forwarding information. No death certificate on file. I finished the catalog. I had to, it was my job. But I left room 214's file exactly where it wanted to be, in the active drawer, and I didn't touch it again. On my last day in that archive, I checked one final time. The name on the tab had changed again. It wasn't mine anymore. It was someone else's. Someone I didn't recognize. I think about who has that file now. I think about it more than I'd like to admit. I collect hospital ledgers the way some people collect coins, for the history in the handwriting. Ashgrove Memorial's admittance ledger came to me through an estate sale, still bound in its cracked leather cover, water-stained at the edges. I wanted it for a local history piece. I didn't expect it to still be writing itself. The last confirmed entry, in the hospital's own hand, was dated the night it closed in 1974. After that, blank pages. That's what the auction listing said, and that's what I found when I first opened it. Blank, all the way to the back cover. 3 weeks into my research, I opened it again to check a date, and there was a new entry. One line, same neat clinical handwriting as every other page, dated 2 days prior, this year. A name, an admittance time, nothing else. I ran the name through the local paper's archive. A missing persons report, filed by a family 40 miles from here, dated the same day. Reported last seen leaving for a walk. Never came home. I told myself it was coincidence. A common name. I kept the ledger because I'm not proud of this, but I wanted to see if it would happen again. It did. For more times over the following month. For more names. I checked each one. For more missing persons filings, each dated within a day of the ledger entry appearing. None of them have been found. None of them have any connection to Ashgrove Memorial that I can trace. No relatives who worked there, no history with the building, nothing. Except one thing. I went back through every page of that ledger, front to back, all the confirmed 1974 entries, looking for a pattern. Every single discharge in that ledger, every patient who left Ashgrove Memorial alive, was signed off by the same physician. Same signature, same looping W, same clipped final stroke. Drive W. Callahan. He doesn't sign the new entries. The new names arrive with no signature at all. Just the name, the time, and then nothing. Like whoever's filling out the intake hasn't gotten to that part of the process yet. Like the ledger is still open, still admitting. I don't know how a book that's been in my possession, in a locked case, in my own home, keeps acquiring new pages of information I never see written. I've considered burning it. I've considered giving it back to whoever ran that estate sale and pretending I never bought it. I haven't done either. Because there's a blank line at the bottom of the current page, and some nights I catch myself checking it before I check anything else, half convinced I'll recognize the name when it finally arrives. Demolition set for next month. My job was simple. Survey every accessible level for structural risk before the crew moves in. The sub-basement wasn't on the blueprints the county gave me. I found the stairwell by accident, behind a false wall panel in the records archive, and against every piece of professional judgment I have, I went down. The surgical theater was intact in a way nothing else in that building was. No dust, no decay. Steel tables gleaming under grime-free overhead lamps that shouldn't have had power. Instrument trays laid out in perfect rows. Everything angled the way a textbook would show you, not the way 50 years of abandonment should have left it. There was a bed at the center of the room, behind a viewing window, the kind of setup meant for observation cases. And there was someone in it. I want to be careful how I describe this, because I've gone back and forth on it every night since. It wasn't a body in the way you'd expect after 50 years. It wasn't fresh either. It existed in a state that didn't make sense to me, skin drawn but not decomposed, chest rising, so slightly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, and falling again. Room 214 was stenciled on a plate beside the window. The patient's wrist was still banded. I couldn't read the name from where I stood, and I made the choice, the one I regret most, to get closer. That's when the lights in the theater changed. Not flickered. Shifted, warmer, surgical white instead of the sickly overhead glow, like the room was preparing itself. And Dr. Callahan was standing on the other side of the observation glass, between me and the bed, gloved hands folded in front of him, face angled down into the shadow cast by the surgical lamp overhead. He didn't threaten me. That's the part one can't explain to people who ask. He simply raised one hand and pressed it flat against the glass, and where his palm touched, the glass frosted over from the inside, the way breath fogs a cold window, except the room was warm and he wasn't breathing. I ran the survey. I didn't finish it. I called in a structural concern I didn't actually observe, just to have a reason on file for recommending the crew avoid that level entirely, seal the stairwell, pour concrete over the false panel before anyone else finds their way down there. I keep thinking about the wristband I never got close enough to read. I keep thinking that whoever's name is on it has been under his observation for 52 years, and that observation, in that room, was never actually finished. I think Callahan isn't guarding a patient. I think he's still working the case. And I think demolition isn't going to be enough to close the file. 3 separate people crossed paths with Ashgrove Memorial this year, and none of us knew about the others until the demolition company's insurance investigation pulled our reports together. A security contractor, an archivist, a historian with a ledger that shouldn't still be writing itself. When the investigator laid our statements side by side, she found what none of us could have found alone. Every account lined up to the same date. Tonight, the night the ledger finally listed a discharge. I went back. I know how that sounds after everything I already told you, but I needed to see it end, if it was going to end. The demolition crew had already sealed the sub-basement stairwell in concrete, per my recommendation. I found another way down. There's always another way into a building that wants you inside it. The surgical theater lights were on when I got there, full warm white, no green left anywhere in that room. The observation bed was empty. Sheets pulled back, neat, the way a bed looks right after someone's helped out of it, not slept in for 50 years. Callahan was standing beside it. And for the first time in every account any of us gave, the contractor's radio silence, the archivist's shadowed stacks, the historian's signed ledger, my own frosted glass. He was facing me directly, not turned away, not bandaged, not lost in shadow cast by a lamp. I still couldn't see his face. I need you to understand that isn't a failure of description on my part. It isn't darkness or an angle or a trick of the light. There is simply nothing there to see. In a way, I don't have the vocabulary to explain to you sitting wherever you're sitting right now, safe, with the lights on. He held up the wristband, room 214's band, the one I'd never gotten close enough to read, and set it down on the empty bed, gently, the way you'd set down something that mattered to you for a very long time. Then he did something none of the 3 of us expected. He reached up, slowly, and removed one glove. Just the one. And beneath it, his hand looked entirely, unremarkably human. That was worse, somehow, than anything monstrous would have been. He walked past me, not through me, past me, closing the space the way any person closes it, and climbed the stairwell I'd used to get in, and I heard the door at the top of it open and close, and nothing after that. When I checked the lobby on my way out, the clock had moved. 3:15, first time in 50 years. The historian's ledger, I'm told, has been blank ever since. No new names. The demolition went forward on schedule. Ashgrove Memorial is a parking lot now. I don't know who room 214 was. I don't know where Callahan discharged himself to. I only know that somewhere, tonight, in some other building none of us have found yet, a clock is about to start running for the first time in a very long while.